In this video, we're going to talk about palettes. This is one of the tools that we're going to describe in this chapter that are not really necessary, but at the end, they're going to make our life easier. To start, we're going to see what we use them for. We're going to introduce some alternatives just in case we don't want to get one. And we will talk about how our life will improve if on the other side we decide to get at least one. We're going to describe some of the most common shapes and materials that we can find on the market. We're going to find out which one is better and why, pointing out some criteria that we should keep in mind when we choose them. At the end, we're going to see what to do if we want to make them by ourselves. As we have seen, the first step when we actually start painting is to prepare our colors. We also have seen that we don't really need a palette to do it, but at the end, if we want to save some time, it's definitely the best place where we want to do it. Our target is to keep our oils with us as close as possible to where we actually are going to do our work. To do this, we don't really need a palette, it's enough any support that we can easily move and bring with us. For example, we can use a piece of plywood, a piece of cardboard or cardboard, and so on. So why do we need a palette then? Because theoretically it's ergonomic. That means that it has the right shape that helps us feeling comfortable. And since we are going to hold it in our hand for several hours while we paint, we definitely want it to be comfortable. A rectangular board definitely isn't ergonomic because we have to pinch it. And after some time, let's say that our hand will definitely feel not comfortable. So what type is the best and how shall we hold it? We said that palettes are theoretically ergonomic because it's really a matter of how we feel it. That's why they have designed so many different shapes. At the end, we only have two ways to hold it. In the first, the palette is over our forearm and we grab it in this way, while in the second, it goes in the opposite direction and we hold it in this other way. In the first case, these types are better, while in the second, these are definitely our choice. After some time painting, we will figure out what position and what shape are the best for us. On the market, we can find palettes made with different materials. The most common are solid wood and plywood, but we can also find them in plastic. By our point of view, the best material is the one that ensures to our palette to be as light as possible and stiff enough to easily support our oil's weight. The best material that I've found so far is a sandwich structure made with two very thin layers of wood or semi-wood, with in the middle a layer of rigid but foamy material. This is a kind of technical structure normally used in nautical application. At the end, it's the same sandwich principles that in aviation they use with composite materials. Another important feature is the size. In fact, we want to get at least two measures, one large one when we have to do the painting, and one smaller that we're going to need every time we work with a single or a couple of colors. For example, when we have to rework some detail in our painting when it's almost complete. The last thing that we want is a palette that doesn't absorb our oil colors, no matter if it's the material itself or the varnishing that ensure this feature. The first reason is because if it gets soaked with our paints, it's almost impossible to clean it in a proper way after we finish painting. The second is because over the time, keeping absorbing, it gets heavier. At the end, what we want is to find a palette with the right shape and size, made with the right material that will allow us to hold it in a comfortable way. it should be large enough to contain all the colors that we need to finish our painting. I personally don't like very large palettes, so most of the times, if I need many colors, I prefer to separate them on more than one palette. But this is a very personal choice. On the market, we can also find these paper palettes that we don't need to clean. In fact, at the end, we just need to tear the page off and restart on a new one in our next painting session. With this in mind, we are able to search for our palette, but there is another option. We can actually make them by ourselves, and this is probably the best option because it will allow us to draw exactly the shape and the size that we want, to pick the material that we like and finish it in a proper way. If we decide to make them by ourselves, the first step is to find the base panel of the right material. As we said, the best option, at least in my opinion, is the 3mm wooden sandwich that they normally use for nautical interior construction. This panel should be already oil-proof, so we shouldn't have to do any additional treatment. If we can find it, I think it's the best solution, but normally it's not really the common thing that you can find in a local hardware shop. A good and much easier to find alternative is the 3mm plywood. It's normally 10 to 15% heavier than the sandwich and less rigid, but it's still good enough to support our colors. Now, we're going to use a piece of cardboard to draw and make a pattern for our palette. We're going to hold it in our hand and try to see how we feel it. And if we like it, that's it. Otherwise, we can modify it a little bit or redraw a new one. In alternative, we can use an existing palette that we like. Now that we have our model, we are going to use it to draw on our board the shape of our palette. While we do this, let's try to optimize it, trying to arrange on a single panel as many palettes as possible. Once we have drawn all the shapes that we want, by using a fret saw one by one following the lines, we're going to cut them off. Now, we have to make the hole for the finger. To do this, we are going to use a driller to make a small hole inside the shape that we want to cut. We're going to let the blade of our saw pass through the hole, and we're going to tie it. At this point, following its shape, we're going to cut the hole off. Now our palette is almost ready. If we got the sandwich, what we have to do now is just to smooth the edges with some sandpaper. If on the other side we have used the plywood, at this point we still need to smooth the edges, but we also need to prime the wood. In this case, we're gonna do it using some wood primer and eventually some transparent varnish later. I think for our application it's better to use a water-based primer. In this way, since they don't like each other, it should be easier to clean our palette later from our oils. And with this last suggestion, we have concluded our discussion on the palettes. If you enjoyed this video, we will really appreciate if you could click on like and subscribe to our channel. It will also help us very much if you could leave a comment. Thank you for watching this video and see you in the next one.